Welcome, everyone. My name is Dan Bagley, and I'm very thankful for everyone being here. I am going to introduce Chris Goforth here, but first, as a friendly reminder, the lecture will be recorded. If you do not wish to appear on the recording, please turn off your camera to reduce the feedback. Everyone was muted upon entrance. If you have questions during the presentation, please utilize the chat. I will be monitoring. And then also speaking with Chris beforehand, she will have in the middle between two of her lecture pieces a opportunity for some questions as well. So if you want to wait till then, that's fine as well. I will read out the questions when they're appropriate, but if you please know, there will be time for a Q&A at the end of the lecture. So with that, if you have any other questions, let me know right now. If not, I'm going to hand this over to Chris, and she is going to illuminate us on a dazzle of dragonflies, and I can't wait to hear about this. So, Chris, take it away.
All right. Well, thank you all for being here tonight. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here really quickly. I hope that shows up. Looking good?
You're great.
Okay, perfect. Yep. All right, so tonight I'm going to be sharing a little bit about some dragonfly research that I have done with the help of citizen scientists. So my name is Chris Goforth. I'm the head of citizen science head of collaborative science now at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. It's my job to connect people with scientific research opportunities they can have as non-experts. And so I do a lot of work where we're going out in the field and we're collecting data for various projects. I do a lot of consulting with people that want to do citizen science at their sites. I do some research in citizen science, including in educational settings. But my background is entomology. I studied aquatic insects in grad school in Arizona. I was a biology major as an undergrad, and I really, really, really love insects. And my very first project that I started when I got into citizen science in the first place is a dragonfly project. They're my favorite group of insects, have been pretty much since I decided I liked insects when I was like 10. And so I'm going to share some of the work that I've done with the help of citizen scientists. So let's go ahead and get started here. Hold on. Let me click on something else here to make this go smoother. Okay, there we go. Okay, so the first project I want to talk about is my project called the Dragonfly Swarm Project. So this is the project that got me into citizen science in the first place. I saw a dragonfly swarm at a lake that I worked on in Arizona. I had a second job where we were doing water quality, and this lake had basically no dragonflies at it. And then one day we showed up and there were suddenly hundreds and hundreds of dragonflies. And I got really excited about it, but I couldn't find any information about what this behavior was. And so I wrote about it on a blog that I had at the time. That was a science communication fellowship that I had, and we had to keep blogs for that. And people started sharing stories back with me about similar things that they had seen. So I knew this was something that people were actually seeing. I was personally very interested in it. And I decided to create the Dragonfly Swarm Project as a way to gather data on this behavior that I was really personally interested in with the help of other people that were seeing it in other places. So this project started in 2009. I didn't even know what citizen science was at the time. And I kind of just accidentally created this citizen science project without knowing anything about this field. But I loved it so much because people have an opportunity to contribute to things that I want to learn about. And then I have the opportunity to share things back out with people. So I want to start by talking about what swarms are in the first place. And basically, it's a big group of dragonflies that are together away from water. So dragonflies spend a lot of time at water because they have stages of their reproduction that require aquatic habitat. So the eggs and the nymphs are typically in water. And so they need to be near water to reproduce. But if you see dragonflies in big numbers away from water, that's a dragonfly swarm. And there's two different types of them. The first are feeding swarms, and you can see these things are notoriously hard to actually video record or photograph. I've never taken a good photo of a dragonfly swarm, but you can see them kind of just swarming around in this area. This was a small swarm that I saw at work a few years ago. They were just flying around, taking advantage of all these little insects that were kind of coming out of the ground that day. And these feeding swarms are just that. They're feeding. They are kind of moving back and forth within this kind of defined area, small space. And they are taking advantage of locally abundant food. So they are predators. They're eating other insects. And they can reach really big numbers in these swarms. So we've got feeding swarms. There's lots and lots and lots of these. And this is what I saw. The first swarm I saw was this. In Arizona, they don't really get the other type of swarm, which is migratory swarm. And this is a swarm that was recorded by many, many, many people in Rhode Island last year. There was a huge migratory swarm that flew onto this beach off the water. And so there were lots and lots and lots of dragonflies flying around on this beach. And as you can see, all of these dragonflies are flying the same direction. So they are all moving from one place to another place. They're not really kind of milling around like the ones in the feeding swarm video where they were flying in a certain direction and they were kind of all flying together. This swarm disturbed a lot of people. It was a huge thing, made national news. People were either really excited about it or really unhappy about it. And the thought of local researchers was that there had been some drought conditions that were occurring and that these dragonflies were getting up and moving to get to a new spot. So these are a distinct direction. They're moving from one place to another. So the project, let me introduce you to kind of what I'm doing with this project. So the first is that I'm really interested in how this swarming behavior works. So I want to know like what they're actually doing. But I also want to know what kind of conditions lead to this dragonfly swarming. You have to be in the right place at the right time to see these things. It's really hard to predict where they're going to be. And so I've always wanted to predict where they're going to be. I have not accomplished that yet, but I do know a lot about what kind of conditions lead to this behavior. And then I also want to know why this behavior matters in the first place. It matters surely to the environment, but I think it matters to us as people as well. And I'll share a little bit about that a little bit later. So as far as how I collect data, my data collection is very serendipitous. Because you have to be at the right place at the right time to see one of these things, it's really hard to tell people where to go or where to look. So what typically happens with my project, I don't advertise much in advance because it's hard to do that. But someone will see a swarm wherever they happen to be. So it might be in their yard, it might be at a park, could be literally anywhere on the beach. But they see the swarm and then they are curious about it. And so they look it up online. And because I produce most of the information about these dragonfly swarms, all of my information comes up as the top search results for this. And people will find my project, and then I ask them to submit a form if they would like to do so. So the project tells them a lot about kind of what the behavior is, what kinds of conditions are leading to the swarming that they're seeing. It explains kind of what they're seeing, so they have an idea of kind of what it is. And then they are invited to share their data with me. And I collect my data through a really simple Google form. I don't have any sort of fancy equipment. I don't have any sort of web help. I have a WordPress.com website with a Google form embedded in it. And that's how I collect my data. But I'm just asking basic information. Like I want to know some contact information so I can get in touch with you if I need to, but I need to know the date, time, and location of the swarm, what type of swarm they saw, whether it is a feeding swarm or migratory swarm, and there's some descriptions about what that looks like, so they know which one is which. And then I want them to estimate optionally how many individuals are in the swarm. I asked them to share kind of what they saw the dragonflies doing, and whether there are any disturbances in the area. So whether there's flooding or fires or droughts or huge storms or people mowing, there's all kinds of things that can potentially lead to this. So I asked people a number of questions. They really just have to share the date, time, location, and type of swarm that they see. And then everything else is optional. But the last question I ask, or not, it's not even a question. I invite people to share whatever they want to share that they haven't already shared. So they can share their feelings about what they're seeing. They can tell me whether this is the most magical experience they've ever had in their entire life, like that was my experience, or they can tell me that they're absolutely terrified of leaving their front door or their front front yard because there's dragonflies flying around. Some people ask me how to kill them. So there's an option for people to share some really cool kind of personal stories. And that's my very favorite part. It's not very scientific, but it's really, really interesting. And I kind of love seeing how other people respond to these things. So studying swarming with citizen science is really great because these are not exactly rare, but they are rarely observed and they're really unpredictable. So I can't be in any one place and expect to see one of these swarms. And I've now seen probably 50 or 60 swarms altogether. So I've seen a lot of them, but that's only 50 or 60 over like 12 or 13 years that I've been looking for these things. And so it's really, really hard to study as a single individual scientist or with the traditional way that science is done. So if I had people helping me with this project, if I had grad students or whatnot, there'd probably be, 3 or 4 or 5 of us looking at this. But because this is a rarely observed behavior and we don't know how to predict where to see them, and people tend to only participate after they've already seen the swarm, this is a really, really great approach. I can collect a lot more data with the help of citizen scientists than I can on my own. And so this is really kind of an ideal type of thing to do with citizen science. I can have lots more people in lots more places making so many observations of this behavior, and far, far, far more than I've ever had any hope of being able to do in an entire lifetime. So currently I have about 12,000 observations of dragonfly swarms from all over the world, and about 60 of those are mine. And so most of them come from other people. I'm saying I've seen 60 of these as someone that knows exactly what to look for, the exact kind of conditions to look for them in, the right kind of places to go to, and I've still only seen 60, in 13 or 14 years that I've been doing this. So this is a really, really great kind of project to do with citizen science. Okay, so what I've learned from this project, a number of different things. First is that swarms are largely unpredictable still. I've been watching these for so long, and still cannot tell you where to go to look for these things other than, grassy fields like you see here. You can see the dragonflies flying a little bit. They're hard to see. As I said, they're really hard to video record. But any type of grassy field like this in the fall in North Carolina or late summer is a great place to look because there's lots of little insects that are flying around that they want to eat. Or if you are on a beach in mid to late August, you are likely to see dragonflies swarming up the beach in those migratory swarms. So there's places I can kind of direct you, but they're still really unpredictable. A perfect day where I think everything's in the right set of conditions for these things to form might never actually have any swarms at all. They follow certain flight patterns when they fly. So feeding swarms, they tend to either kind of fly in this kind of rectangular pattern, which is what they'll do at lakes and ponds a lot of the time, or they might do these kind of figure eights. So they're kind of flying back and forth within this defined space. And so they're kind of just going back and forth through those little insects that they want to eat. But the migratory swarms are moving from one place to another. Typically, they're moving from a place where their habitat or the conditions have degraded to a place where it's better. So that might be in the fall. There are a number of migratory dragonfly species that we have here in North Carolina that will actually move in the fall the way that something like monarchs or birds will. And so they're moving from a place where it's like getting colder to a place that's getting warmer and there's still food available. Or it could be after a drought and all of their habitat dries up. It could be after a fire and again, all their habitat is destroyed. And so they can move for a lot of different reasons, but they're moving from one place to another. They also fly certain kind of heights. So feeding swarms, they're typically about 1 to 10 feet above the ground. And so they're pretty low to the ground. These are easier to see than the migratory swarms. Migratory swarms are really actually kind of hard to find and hard to see because they are a lot higher up. So some of them will really be close to the ground. So like that swarm that you saw in Rhode Island, those were really close to the ground. But a lot of them are really high up. They're flying up with like the hawks. and other birds that are migrating. And so they're really, really high, and people can't see them because, if you have an insect, I mean, they're still pretty big as insects go, but they're really small as far as animals go. If you have an insect that's, 3.5 inches across, flying, 1,000 feet above your head, you're not even going to be able to see them. And so we probably miss vast numbers of migratory swarms of dragonflies just because they're so high up that we can't even notice that they're there. Disturbances often precede swarms. This could be all kinds of different disturbances. So really big rains or storms or hurricanes all will cause lots of big swarms, like right before the storm starts or right after a storm. Big winds can sometimes cause issues. So hurricanes in particular, dragonflies will actually move in front of hurricanes because all the wind that the hurricanes bring along with them stir up all those little insects that they want to eat. And so you will see them moving kind of in front of storms to take advantage of those little insects being disturbed. Fires are a really big part of it. Drought is a big part of it. But just simple things like mowing your lawn can be enough to attract a little swarm of dragonflies. So you might end up with, like 30 or 40 or 50 dragonflies in your yard because you've just mowed and all those little insects got kicked up. And dragonflies are coming in to take advantage of those. Feeding swarms are reported a lot more often than migratory swarms. Again, I think that people just don't see the migratory swarms because most of them are pretty high up, but they are probably less observed, and they're probably less common than feeding swarms. Like feeding swarms happen a lot. Again, you have to be in the right place at the right time to see them, but they do happen often. Migratory swarms only happen at certain times a year or when there's been a really major disturbance. Swarms are also most often reported at dusk. That is a time where a lot of little insects start moving around. So think about mosquitoes, they all come out at dusk, and dragonflies will come in and eat all those mosquitoes. In fact, in some of those little statements that people make at the end of the form, they'll talk about standing out in the middle of the swarm. They'd been out in their yard earlier and were getting completely destroyed by mosquitoes. But when they stand out in the middle of the swarm where all the dragonflies are flying around them, none of the mosquitoes are eating them anymore because the dragonflies are eating all the mosquitoes as they fly around. So lots and lots and lots of these are reported at dusk. And I think that's the time that you're most likely to see it, like late afternoon to dusk. Swarms are most often reported late summer. About mid-July to the very beginning of September is what I consider peak season. And so there are lots and lots and lots of dragonfly swarms that you can see during that time. You can also have swarms of any size. So you can have just a few dragonflies, or you can have millions of dragonflies. The biggest swarm that I've seen reported in the scientific literature was something like 2.5 billion estimated. Of course, scientists were not sitting there counting 2.5 billion dragonflies. But with the estimates for the size of the swarm and kind of the number of dragonflies they could count in a small area, they estimated, billions. So these can be really small. What you would get in your yard after you mow your lawn might be, a few dozen, or it could be billions. So they can be lots and lots of different sizes. Most people are seeing swarms who report to my project in the kind of like 25 to maybe 500 dragonfly range. So I would consider those small to medium-sized swarms, and then anything about, like 10,000 or more, I would consider like a big swarm. Swarms are also often, almost always, made up of males and females. So a lot of times you'll see these kind of segregation between what the males are doing and what the females are doing with dragonflies. Males tend to be flying around ponds a lot and hanging out, waiting for females to come. The females stay away from the ponds and they just feed away from water until they want to actually lay eggs. Then they'll fly to the water. They'll mate with whatever male is in the space that occupying the space that they want to lay their eggs, and then they'll lay their eggs and leave. So it's not common for males and females to be flying together, but they do fly together during these swarms. Swarms can also be made up of multiple species. And so the first swarm that I saw in Arizona, that was 4 different species mixed together. And again, it's not totally usual for dragonflies to be flying together in groups with multiple species. So usually you'll see kind of like one species of dragonfly kind of occupying like this height at a pond, and another one that's maybe a little bit higher up, and one that's closer to shore, one that's further out in the water. So they tend to segregate themselves by species, but during swarms, you will have multiple different species together. As far as where they occur, you can see here that they like the wetter parts of our country more than they like the drier parts of the country. So that one I saw down here in Arizona, the first one is like this spot right here. There are not many in this kind of dry area in the Rockies and all these desert areas of the Great Plains and the Southwest. So they tend to be along kind of shores. They tend to fall along rivers, or they're just in the really wet parts of our country. And the same thing happens with the migratory swarms. You see more of them with the wetter areas than you do other places, but you'll also notice that they are following like really distinctive tracks in a lot of these areas. So again, we don't have as many reports of these migratory swarms as we do the feeding swarms, but you know, they are following major rivers. So I think this is the Ohio River here, and they follow the Mississippi and the Missouri rivers a lot, and they follow coastlines. So what's likely happening here is they're using major bodies of water as guides for where to fly when they are making these migratory treks. Now, that's not always the case. There's one species over here in Oregon and Washington that actually starts usually here in somewhere Saskatchewan or British Columbia, like anywhere in this area here. They'll fly kind of towards the coast and then they'll fly down the coast. So they're not following a river here, but they fly towards the coast and then follow the coast down. So they're following these kind of major waterways. And there are equal numbers of swarms reported in urban and rural areas, which I always think is really exciting. We always think of rural areas having a lot more wildlife, and they usually do, but these are happening as often in urban areas as rural areas. Now, there's one caveat to this is that there are more people that live in urban areas, so the likelihood that they're seeing like every last little swarm is a lot higher than what you would see in rural areas. For example, here in Wyoming, like I have the fewest reports from Wyoming of any state in the country, and it's in one of the drier areas, so I don't expect to see as many swarms there, but the number of people in Wyoming is really, really small. And they have large tracts of land. A lot of the people that live in rural areas in Wyoming have huge tracts of land. And so there are just not many people to see these swarms in the first place. Swarms occur worldwide in wetter regions and mid-latitudes. They're not in the coldest parts of the world, and they're also not in the very hottest parts. Like you don't see this happening as much along the equator as you do kind of in the mid-latitudes. So far, I've got 63 countries reporting swarms, so this is something that's definitely happening all over the world. And I've got every continent represented in those 63 countries, apart from Antarctica. It's too cold for dragonflies to be in Antarctica anyway, so I would never expect them to be there. But that's not to say that you wouldn't see dragonflies flying over Antarctica at some point. There are dragonflies that land on boats out in the middle of the ocean in really large numbers, like migratory swarms from India fly to Africa and back with the wandering glider species. And so it's possible that someone someday will see a swarm fly really high over Antarctica, but I'd be really surprised to see them on the ground. So best conditions for swarms, lots of little prey insects, late July to early September at dusk, along a migratory route. So if you are along a coast or you're along a major river, you're more likely to see them than anywhere else. And if there's been a disturbance in the area, you're more likely to see them than other times. And then as far as why we should care, dragonflies like to eat. They eat a lot of little insects. So they help limit prey populations. They are really important for controlling mosquitoes and black flies and other biting flies that we don't like. But they also just kind of generally control a lot of little prey insects species. And so they're really, really important for kind of controlling disease transmission in humans. They're really important for just controlling the general overall population of a number of different species. And so dragonflies eat a lot of insects that cause human misery. And I think that the really important part of this entire behavior is that they are kind of restoring balance in a lot of cases. So if you think about the disturbances that I've mentioned, where you see these swarms forming most often, they are in places where there are um, oh, so totally blanked on what I was going to say there. Sorry, they're in places where there's floods and you get large numbers of mosquitoes coming out, and the dragonflies will move in and kind of take care of those extra mosquitoes. So they're kind of bringing populations of insects back down to the size that they need to be. All
Quick
right.
question,
Yeah.
if you don't mind. So,
Yep.
Chris, you're talking about all the benefits
Hmm.
of the swarms. Is there an opposite effect? Are there any ecological consequences for large swarms of dragonflies?
I would say probably not. They are not sticking around in an area for very long. Like swarms typically only last about half an hour, a couple of hours. Maybe if it's a really big swarm and a really big number of prey insects, it might last for 3 or 4 days. But then they move on, and so they go to some other place. So I don't think there's any real downsides to this behavior, apart from the people that are really scared of them and don't like them around.
Being on a beach and getting it. Yeah, okay, got
Yeah.
it.
And like they don't bite people. They're not really interested in us. We're way too big for them. So they're pretty harmless as far as insects go. Like if you like get a hold of one and grab it by its head, like you can get bitten, but you're not going to get bitten if you're just standing there and one lands on you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, a few interesting participant demographics, and then I'll open up some questions about this project before we switch to the other. So first, female participants outnumber male participants 3 to 1. And I love that because a lot of times when you think about insects, you think about guys doing this work. Women frequently don't like insects as much. And it can be a really hard sell for people to want to participate in an insect project. But in this particular project, females outnumber males by a lot. Um, there are also a lot of observations where people are describing the behavior and they're describing it in really great detail. And I love that. They're paying attention. They can describe, that these dragonflies were flying, like 1.5 to 2.5 feet off the ground, and they were following this exact pattern and kind of just doing this over and over and over again. But people are also really terrible at identifying species and estimating swarm size. And so if they are reporting these two things, like I have to be a little cautious about how reliable I think that data is. Like some people tell me that these dragonflies are 8 inches long. The biggest dragonfly in the world is only like 5.5 inches long. So an 8 inch dragonfly isn't even possible. There's a damselfly in the Amazon that reaches 8 inches, but it's in the Amazon. It's not here in North Carolina. So when people tell me that they're seeing these 8 inch dragonflies, I have to be a little bit cautious about that data point that they have given me for the size. And estimating swarm size, people are terrible at that, but that's a normal thing. Like everyone knows that people are terrible at estimating sizes of large numbers of things. Now, if you only have 12 or 20 dragonflies in your yard, that's a little bit different. But if you're doing something like 10,000 dragonflies, it's a lot harder to actually estimate. And I suspect everyone overestimates both the size of the dragonflies and the size of the swarms. And most people have no idea what species they're looking at, which is fine. I don't expect them to. They can describe what colors they see, and that will give me a really good idea of what they're looking at without them needing to know what they are themselves. Okay, so I have a few questions that I still want to answer. I want to know if all species swarm. I suspect they do, but I don't know that yet. I probably will never know that my entire life, but I'm hoping that I can get really close to answering that question. I want to know if some places are more likely to get swarms and why. I think they probably are more likely to get swarms in some places than others, but that why component is really important. I'm really interested in if this behavior is more likely in certain species than others. I suspect it is, but again, would like to have a little bit more data to show that. And I really want to know how the swarms actually form. So how do dragonflies get into those groups in the first place? I can think of two different hypotheses, and there's probably more. One is that each individual dragonfly finds that little population of prey insects individually. I'm thinking about feeding swarms here in particular. And so they're all kind of all coming to the food on their own. But there's also another possibility, they have that certain flight behavior, or that certain flight pattern that they take, those kind of figure eights or the rectangular flights. So it could be that other dragonflies flying over see that behavior that another dragonfly is doing, and they can know that there's food available based on what that other dragonfly is doing. So I'm really interested in kind of teasing those two things apart. It's a little bit tricky to do. Dragonflies are really hard to work with in lab settings. So this isn't something I can do in a lab. And when you have all the external variables, when you're outdoors doing it in the field, it's a lot trickier to actually get solid data. But it's something that I would like to try to work out at some point. And I have some ideas for how to do it, but have not actually pursued it yet. All right, so if you see a swarm in the next 6 to 8 weeks or so, which, we're about to enter peak season here, I would love for you to report it. I still have my report form on my old blog. I don't really update my blog much anymore, but you can go to dragonflywoman.com/DSP, which is Dragonfly Swarm Project, /report, and that will get you to that Google form. You can also look up the Dragonfly Swarm Project on SciStarter and enter your data there. I would love to hear more information about more swarms from anyone that wants to share them. All right, that's what I have for the first project. I'm going to switch over to the other one, but does anyone have questions about this before we change topics a bit?
Anybody? Can I ask one real quick question, not knowing what we're about to do?
Yep.
You had mentioned the colors and the mating. I know this isn't just a swarms thing, but just kind of curious, what do colors and dragonflies have? How does that work?
So a lot of dragonflies are sexually dimorphic, and so the males and females will look really different. And so the colors can be really important for a lot of dragonflies. You can tell that this individual is a female versus a male because they're different colors. And you can actually see some really interesting patterns where you'll have mating mistakes made, where like a male will grab another male because he's got kind of female-ish colors, or vice versa, that a female might have kind of male coloration, and they won't get as many mates because the males don't necessarily recognize them as being female. So there's a lot of color things going on in dragonflies, and they have very good color vision. They can almost surely see all these colors and use them to distinguish their own species from other species, and also males and females.
So do they prefer then to stay more with their color when they're swarming? I know you said there could be up to 4 different types swarming, but is it something where they usually stick together like birds of a feather?
I don't think so much with the swarms. The migratory swarms tend to be a little bit more limited in the number of species in them than the feeding swarms. I think feeding swarms is just like all you can eat buffet, and every dragonfly that's in the area wants to just take advantage of as much food as they can possibly get in the shortest amount of time possible. So I don't think they care so much then, because it's all about eating. They're not mating. They're not trying to interact with each other. They're just trying to eat as much as they can.
We just got a question in, and it was, what color are the females?
Oh, it depends on the species. So like here in North Carolina, our most common species that I see are blue dashers, and those are the males are blue and the females are black with the kind of yellow markings on them. The eastern pond hawks, the males are blue again, and the females are green. And then in the green darners, the males are green in front and blue in back, and the females are green in front and either green or kind of a brownishy purpley color in the back. So it depends on the species. There's a lot of different variations in colors, and pretty much all of them will have a different color pattern.
Great. Thanks for asking the question, Raylene.
Hey, Christine, I have a question.
Yep.
I popped in a little bit late at the beginning, so sorry if you already talked about this, but I was just interested, how did you become interested in dragonflies?
Oh, I was in 4-H for a million years when I was a kid, and I got really into dragonflies because you had to make a collection for your 4-H project, and no one had dragonflies in their collections, and I just really wanted to be the person that got dragonflies in my collection. So I spent a lot of time at ponds collecting dragonflies, trying to have the biggest and best dragonfly collection in my collection. And when you start doing that, you start paying attention to what they're actually doing. And I just became completely enamored by their behaviors and what they do and how they work, and all the colors that they have. I just think they're really, really fascinating insects.
All right. I think we're ready to move on.
All right. Okay, so whoop. Second project. Is one I did with kids. So this is the Dragonfly Detectives, and I got a grant in 2015 to do this project. So it's a little bit old at this point. I'm working on writing up the paper to publish based on the findings for this now. But what I wanted to do was try to get kids involved in dragonfly research. I was approached by the state parks to create an educational program for kids that could come to the parks and actually do work in the parks related to citizen science. And what I had them do was basically a version of what I did for my senior thesis as an undergrad for my biology degree, because I love this topic. And my very, very, very favorite scientific question is how dragonflies respond to changes in weather. And I don't know why I'm so completely enamored with this topic. I love it. I spent so much time working on my senior thesis as an undergrad, just sitting on this dock at a wetland in Colorado, watching dragonflies fly around. And it just hours and hours and hours of just watching dragonflies fly. And I just thought it was amazing. And they have lots of kind of weird little ways that they respond to changes in weather. For example, there's a behavior called pond abandonment, where when you have a storm coming in, all the dragonflies will leave a pond. And no one knows exactly why they do it. I think there's probably two different reasons why they might do this. One is that it's actually pretty dangerous. If they get knocked into the water, they can't always get back out of the water. And so if you are in a kind of blustery situation where there's big raindrops hitting and might knock you into the water, that's bad. So it could be that they're leaving for their own personal needs, but they also can sense changes in light intensity. And these dragonflies will also leave ponds to go roost at night. And so it's possible that they are seeing the changes in the light intensity, and that's triggering them saying, oh, it's becoming nighttime, I need to go roost. And so hard to tell these two things apart, but for whatever reason, they abandon ponds. So changes in weather are really, really important to dragonflies. They will change how they behave based on how hot it is, whether it's super windy, whether it's raining or not. And little changes can produce some pretty big impacts, or have some pretty big effects on their behavior. So this is what I wanted these kids to do. I wanted them to study how changes in weather influence flight activity. And so I've wanted to know, I've always wanted to know kind of like how this works. But again, I already had my dragonfly swarm project, and I knew that it worked really well. But I thought maybe I could have kids help with this project. I could have lots of people, lots of places collecting data on this weather behavior, and see kind of what was going on in a much bigger way than I was able to do on my own. And I particularly wanted to have kids help. Kids like dragonflies, they like other insects, but they're also a really kind of untapped group in citizen science. A lot of people actually actively avoid having kids involved in their projects because they don't think that they can collect quality data. But I really wanted to see if that was possible, if they could collect quality data, but also just get them involved with dragonflies, because they're really cool insects. I want more people to appreciate them. And if you start young, that's a really great way to go. So how this worked. I had some questions that I had these kids answer. So I wanted to know how changes in weather impact the flight activity in the common whitetail. So this dragonfly here is one of our most common dragonflies in the state of North Carolina. You can see these pretty much every pond in the area that isn't too terribly shady, so they don't like forested ponds. But if you have like a backyard pond or a neighborhood pond or a retention pond or any other kind of sunny pond, you are likely to have these whitetails at them. You are also likely to see these the very earliest part of the year where dragonflies come out to the very bitter end of the season. And so they're there a lot. So a big, long season. And so this was the dragonfly I identified that people were most likely to be able to see at pretty much every body of water that they might go to look for them. And then I also wanted to know whether kids could collect useful data. Because like I said, people don't necessarily trust that kids can collect data. A lot of people don't trust that adults can collect quality data, let alone kids. And so I wanted to see whether kids could actually collect data that's usable. So we had 25 sites across the state over 4 years that participated in this project. And so you can kind of see, the spread of them here. We had a number kind of in the Raleigh area, but we did have them in a lot of different kind of more rural areas as well. And we reached about 450 kids altogether. I thought it was a really great experience for these kids to, do some actual science. They were collecting data, and let me share kind of how the program worked here. So we worked with grades 4 through 8. That ended up being slightly awkward age range because it did span elementary and middle school. But we had kids that were either from elementary schools or middle schools participating. We typically had the kids 2 hours once a week for 6 weeks. They were going to any of those individual sites. I trained people at all those different sites to have this the program at their site. And so they would go to the closest site to them. During the first week, they would learn how to identify the dragonflies, and they will learn the data collection protocols. So there were a number of different activities that got them excited about this, had them practice with the identification and learn how to collect the data. Then in weeks 2 through 5, they actually collected the data in the field. So they were going to their field site, whichever site it was they were at, and collect the data on the weather and the dragonflies. And then interspersed with the data collection, because let me tell you, kids do not like collecting data. We had a number of fun field activities. And so they were getting to collect dragonflies and do mark recapture studies. They were collecting nymphs out of the bodies of water that they were in and doing a little kind of study on kind of how those works. They were learning about migrations and just doing a lot of just kind of fun activities that weren't necessarily directly related to the dragonflies, but had to do with the kind of their environment, the habitat they were in, migrations and other things. And then on the last week, they analyzed their data. So they took all that data that they collected and created a poster from it. And so they collectively, as a group, will create one poster for their site showing kind of what they learned. And this poster, a lot of people were really frustrated that I wanted them to create this poster because they thought kids would find it really boring. But the poster was the best part. I think the collecting the data part of it was the worst part for these kids. I asked them to collect data for 3 minutes at a time, and they absolutely hated it. Like I'll tell you about a way that I looked at the accuracy of the kids here in just a moment, but they were talking on these videos. I could hear them be like, this is so boring, this is so awful, like they hated it. But when they did their poster, like they realized how much they actually learned and how much they did, and they learned that they had real results, and they loved the posters. So the part that everyone told me was going to be the worst was the part that I actually liked the best, but they really enjoyed kind of getting to see the results of their study. So as far as collecting weather data was concerned, we had some pretty basic tools. We used Kestrel weather devices, which are these little handheld weather devices that could tell us the temperature, wind speed, and wind direction, the humidity, and the barometric pressure. And then they measured light intensity with a light meter, and then rain, they just reported whether it was raining or not. They could tell that on their own. They didn't need a special device to tell them if it was raining or not. So these were the weather parameters we were looking at. And so for we had them collect data 6 times over a 2-hour period for 3 minutes at a time. So we would do 3 minutes and then 3 minutes, and then we'd have some activities and another 3 minutes and 3 minutes and then some more activities. So they were kind of split up a little bit. But we would have a few kids collecting the weather data during a 5-minute or that 3-minute period. And then the rest of the kids were lined up at the pond. And so we had them work in groups of 3. They would form an imaginary line that they all agreed upon that was out about 10 feet in front of them. And every time a whitetail crossed that imaginary line, they would put a little tick mark in their workbook that would tell them that there was a dragonfly flying in that area. And so we created a QA/QC protocol built into this where we were trying to get them to be as close to their teammates as possible in their numbers. So it wasn't about counting as many dragonflies as you possibly could, because kids totally make up data if you have them competing to see who has the most. So we wanted them to compete to see who was the most accurate. And so we had them compare their count to their 2 teammates to see which team could get the closest. As a way to collect more accurate data. And so we had them all lined up, and during the 3 minutes where their other kids were collecting the weather data, they were doing the counts. And then we would combine all the data together after that 3-minute period and share with everyone. So then they created their posters. They did the most amazing posters. I just loved their posters. They were phenomenal. As far as measuring precision and accuracy, so this was the part where I was looking at how well the kids did. So we had a pre and post quiz on identification, and their scores went way up. Last day, they knew exactly what we had them looking at 6 different species, not just the whitetail. We had 5 others as well. They knew all 6 of them by sight. Like they knew their species. That we also had them again compare their counts to their peers, so we were looking to see if that improved over time. We did also record video of what the kids were looking at some of the sites. So we had a camera mounted on a post, and at the beginning of the 3 minutes, they would hit record on the video setting, and then they would record their 3-minute period. And so they would count, and I would also count how many dragonflies they saw crossing that imaginary line. And then we would compare to see how accurate they were. So the precision count was comparing to their peers. Accuracy was comparing their counts to my counts. So what we learned from this. There's 2 different data sets in this study. So we had the scientific data, which was the dragonfly counts and the weather data, so what the kids were actually collecting. And then we had the citizen science data, which was the precision and accuracy, looking at how well those kids actually did the data collection. So as far as the scientific data goes, the kids predicted that that these conditions were the most important for predicting, they were the most important for having the most flights. So the temperature they thought mattered. They thought the humidity really mattered, the light intensity, and how much wind there was. And so they collected data on all of these plus those other parameters. And so we got to see whether they were actually right or not. They made a hypothesis on the first day, and then on the last day, they got to see if they were right. So what we saw is that dragonfly flights increase with light intensity. This is what I found as an undergrad during my senior thesis as well, and it's been reported by a few other people in the literature, so it was nice that their findings went along with it. So not many flights at all when it's really dark out, and you get a lot more flights up here on the brighter end. So as light intensity goes up, you see more flights. You also see flights go down with an increase in humidity. So they don't like the really damp days. I don't blame them. I'm from the Southwest. I don't like humidity at all. I don't want to be outside when it's really humid. And so the dragonflies seem to be in kind of the same boat. Like they fly a lot less often when it's really humid than when it's not. And then the temperature really mattered. So this matters for a lot of insect behaviors. You know, they're exothermic, and the temperature that the dragonfly's body is depends a lot on what the temperature of the air is. And so as you normally see in any sort of insect or any other cold-blooded animal, you see less activity at lower temperatures than you do at high. And so as far as things that weren't important, barometric pressure, whether it was raining or not, didn't really matter. That was a little odd, but a lot of the groups didn't take their kids out when it rained. So there's a caveat with that one. Wind direction didn't seem to matter, and wind speed didn't really seem to matter at all. So it was really just light intensity, humidity, and temperature. As far as the precision and accuracy data goes, their precision went up a lot during the days that they were out in the field. So on the first day, their agreement with their peers was pretty low, but by the last day, their agreement was a lot higher. And so they were improving over just a few hours. With more experience in the field, they were getting better and better and better. So what I do with their data is I actually throw out the first day of data. I kind of look at their precision data for the second day and decide whether it was worth including that data as well. And then on day 3 and day 4, I collect that. I consider that data valid and include that in my data set. And then likewise with the agreement with expert with me on the first day, you know, their counts were all over the place. They were not good. But by the last day, you could not statistically tell their counts apart from mine, which is great. So this says to me that they are able to collect data in a high quality way, that we can actually use data collected by kids. I was asking them to do really precise things like make specific counts. They also had to identify the species they were looking at. So this was actually a really, really hard thing for kids to do, and they did a great job at it. So I was really excited that these kids were able to collect as much data as they did, as effectively as they did. And I could tell really, really easily from looking at their posters how proud they were of their data collection. They were also able to present their posters at Bugfest at the museum if they wanted to. A lot of them did that. And they were all really nervous at the first, couple of minutes that they were there. But they really quickly realized they knew more about dragonflies than anyone else at Bugfest. And they were so proud of what they did. Like they were explaining their data collection and what they did to everyone else. I mean, they would trap these adults like up against the wall in these little packs of kids so that they couldn't get away until the kids told them the whole story. So it was really pretty amazing to see how they did with this and how proud they were of it. And I was really just so excited that, we can actually use their data and they were doing so well. So as far as conclusions go, common whitetails are most active in dry, warm, bright conditions. So basically the same kind of conditions that we as humans tend to like. They like the same kind of weather that we do. And we discovered that children can be effective as data collectors with repeat exposure. So they need to do the protocol multiple times, but once they've done it a few times, they're really pretty great at it. And they can do just as well as anyone else as long as they have, the resources that they need and they have the opportunity to collect data a few times so that they kind of get the hang of it. Okay, a few parting thoughts, and then I'll open up to questions again. So why study dragonflies with citizen science in the first place? The first is that they're charismatic insects. People love these insects. If they're going to like an insect, this is one of the ones that's like really high up on people's lists. Like butterflies and dragonflies are the two most popular by far. And so I like getting people involved in these because there's a lot to love about these animals. They're weird. They've got weird anatomy. They've got weird behaviors. They're big. They're beautiful. They do really cool things. They're just really phenomenal animals. The data accuracy is really high for a lot of these projects. And so people are able to collect really good, high quality data. And so they're collecting information that's actually useful to me and lots of other scientists. It also allows me to collect more data in more places at more times than I could ever possibly do on my own. So having all these kids at places all across, pardon me, all across North Carolina means that, we could collect a lot of data that we would not have been able to collect otherwise. And that's a really amazing thing. All right. I know I talked really fast through that last part, but does anyone have any questions? I just wanted to make sure that I got done. Any questions about anything? And it can be about these two projects or anything about dragonflies. I'm happy to answer too.
Raylene is typing something. While she's typing something, I think I'll just ask a real quick question. You were able to teach the kids just an amazing amount of information in a short amount of time. Is there anything that they taught you that really surprises you?
I think I was not surprised by how accurate they were, but I was really excited about how accurate they were. I just really wanted to prove that kids could actually do this kind of work. And I was really excited that came out. The hatred for the data collection, I think, was the most surprising thing for me. Like, they did not want to sit there and watch dragonflies fly at all. I mean, I'm so excited about it. I love doing that. I just do it automatically anyway. But they really, really, really hated it. And until they got to see, kind of what the results were, like that, they really disliked that. Later, once they did their posters and they got to see kind of, what happened with all this data collection, they understood why they did it. But in the moment, like the hatred for the data collection was intense, and not something that I expected.
I think I'm going to need to see the p-value from the authors. Raylene asks, is it okay to catch dragonflies?
Yes. So the trick is that they fly really fast. They're hard to catch. The possibility of hitting them with the frame of your net is a little bit higher than I think some other insects. But for the most part, as long as you got a good insect net, I think it's totally fine to catch them. This kid that's in the screen here now, she was actually really unhappy because we were asking them to collect some dragonflies one day, because she was so worried that they were going to be hurt. We ended up, I ended up joining their program. I had a person that was teaching at this site, but I came to join them one day so that I could talk about, how we weren't actually hurting them. As long as you're holding their wings all together so that you're not letting them flap, and if they crack their wings, that can really impact them. And you need to be a little bit careful about that frame. But there are lots and lots and lots of dragonflies in our area. None of the ones we have here are endangered or really at risk at all. So if you accidentally hit one, it's going to be okay. And I think the benefits of actually getting an up close look at them and getting that kind of interaction is really high. So I like collecting dragonflies with people a lot, because I think getting to actually hold one and look at it up close is something really powerful. That outweighs the potential of maybe accidentally hitting one, with a net.
Nora asks, does the museum do any other citizen science projects specifically with youth?
We have not yet, but I want to. I have a project called the North Carolina Young Scientist Society that is not exactly a citizen science project, where we're doing a kind of scientist and training program for high schoolers. It's a virtual program, and people can join from anywhere in the state, where they are creating their own projects, and then we're funding those projects for them, and then having a conference for them at the end so that they can share their results for it. So like, they're all out right now collecting their data this summer. So that's the closest thing I have at the moment. But I would love to do more. We do also have Eco Explore, which I know you all participate in as well. So I'm the hub leader for Eco Explore, which is a project based at the Arboretum in Asheville, which is for kids in grades K through 8. And so that one is specifically for kids as well.
Wonderful. I think Nora is typing something. Raylene said thank you, and we'll give her just one moment to finish typing. There we go. She said, that's awesome. I work a lot with the Apex Youth Council, so always looking for new projects. Thank you. Are there any other questions, or anyone want to come off mute and ask any other questions? If not, we can, at our computers right now, give a big round of applause. Thank you so much, Chris. I really appreciate it. I want to be respectful of everyone's time as we roll into 8 o'clock, and just remind everyone, those seeking EE credits, if you will receive a follow-up email later this week with the attached form. And we'll always be making this recording available on the Environmental Lecture Series YouTube playlist. Also, we hope everyone will join us again next month, when we do our lecture with Patrick Brannon of the WUC Highlands Biological Station, and we will be discussing shrews of the Southern Appalachian, and that's on August 11th. So with that, unless we have, yes, I need my EE credits. Great, we got you, Raylene. Does anybody else have any other questions at all?
You should
We're
all
gonna
definitely go see the Shroud presentation. That sounds awesome.
Awesome. Well, everyone is saying thank you, Chris, one more time. We really appreciate it. I learned a lot about dragonflies and swarms, and frankly, that kids are more amazing than we think. We just got to give them a little the opportunity, and they will show up and show out. So, with that, thank you, everyone. Have a great evening, and we'll see you guys soon.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Night.
Thanks so much, Chris.
Yep. Have a good one.